I watched your 29 magazines retrospective and loved it. I'm curious if any of these magazines are actually worth revisiting, or is the information too outdated to be useful? That's a great question. I find a lot of the classic magazines to be incredibly interesting, but it could just be that I'm a crazy person. I think there are a lot of magazines that were good at one point, but you can completely avoid them 2 decades later. Nintendo Power may be visually striking to look at, but the reviews are bland and most of the pages are filled with maps to games you'll probably never play. Similarly, I'd stay away from EGM2. I mean EGM2, the sequel, the magazine. Anyway, the news reads like press releases, and there just isn't enough critical analysis to be found in each issue. If you're serious about checking out these older magazines, I would probably start with Next Generation. You can take or leave the reviews, but there are a number of genuinely interesting articles about the industry and interviews with key developers. It also has a lot of information you can't find online, unless of course you're downloading that specific issue of Next Generation. I would also recommend Die Hard Game Fan. In my retrospective, I laid out a number of reasons why Game Fan was a mess, but as poorly written as it often was, it's also really fun to go back and read. The editors are enthusiastic in an intoxicating way. Speaking of which, some of the reviews were written on acid, which is already a recipe for awesome. Honestly, I'd probably recommend Insight and Foul. I trashed these magazines in the retrospective, but they both offered a lot of original content that hasn't been duplicated anywhere else. They don't represent great journalism, but I do enjoy their novelty. Thankfully, most of these classic magazines can be found online in a downloadable format. I say start with Next Generation and work your way backwards. There are a lot of great and really diverse magazines out there. Something for everybody. Thanks for the great question. Do you have a question about classic video game magazines? Leave a question below and who knows, maybe we'll get around to answering it. And if you haven't watched all 29 episodes of our magazine retrospective, then click the link right here and spend the next 90 minutes discovering the wonderful world of 1980s and 90s game journalism. See you next time, and don't forget to subscribe.